Yes, I'm here.
I think
Sure.
for hope.
Go ahead, Rebecca. But yeah, I think I was going to say the same thing you're going to say. We're going to give it a second to let your other co-chair get here. I just got the meeting streaming online, and we'll get going in like maybe 2 minutes.
And I have a couple introductory remarks, as I'm sure you do as well, Chuck. And then I think we should turn it over to James, who's with us from Alex Forrest's office. I think he's going to give us some legislative updates and probably give us a perspective of his assembly members' view on hybrid meetings.
Yes, I agree.
Chuck and Rebecca, it is 6:35. I don't know if you want to wait a little bit longer to see if Taina joins, or do you want to go ahead and get started?
I think we can get started with the introductions and then
Right.
turning it over to James.
Okay, I think I can spare all of you listening to the rules of the road, since most everybody here is a veteran of our virtual meetings. What did I lose Chuck?
Great.
Chuck turned up his video. I mean, can't hear him.
Right, well, I'll start while we wait for Chuck, and I apologize that my video is off. I'm having some computer issues, which I hope will be resolved shortly. Thank you all for joining us. This is a really important meeting, as I'm sure you all agree, for the future of our board. Just to recap quickly, as we know, we were able to conduct business on Zoom because then Governor Cuomo issued an executive order during the COVID pandemic, which allowed for video conferencing. It was extended, and then the New York State Legislature passed legislation to allow for an expanded use of video conferencing for public meetings in April of 2022. Of course, a couple full board meetings ago, we all voted to extend our temporary decision to allow for hybrid community board meetings. And this is tonight is really to figure out the future of the board. Before I give it to Chuck, I just want people to think about this issue in 4 different ways. The first is, I think, a question we have to decide on an answer to tonight is if we will continue to allow board member hybrid participation. The next is whether we will continue to allow elected official or their representatives participation via Zoom. The third is if we will continue to allow for people who are participating in the public session to do so over Zoom. And then the fourth is I just want to remind everyone, before we started conducting business on Zoom, we didn't live stream all of our meetings. We had we recorded them with a tape recorder, our community board, our committee meetings and our land use meeting. And the full board meeting was posted on YouTube because we had funding for Manhattan Neighborhood Network to tape it. We do not have that funding anymore. So I think we have to also think about continuing a hybrid element solely for the sake that all of our meetings will be posted online and available for the public. Whatever we decide on the three earlier parts, I think it is very important to continue to use Zoom to ensure we can just post a video, regardless of whether or not we have any participants who do so via Zoom. And with that, I turn it to Chuck.
Yes, well, let me just add a couple things. First, we voted to extend it only because Russell asked us to, because he felt he had committed to do that. But there was a lot of concern at the last meeting, even when we voted about doing 4 full board meetings, having it hybrid. And committee meetings, I think a lot of us feel that makes sense to continue that. And it gets a lot of participation from the public and others that you might not get. And our transportation committee, as a number of you here have been on it, has posted some to 200 people sometimes when you get something really contentious. And but I think, and I think we got to deputize Will to come in when he feels he should, just to comment from his perspective, because he has to handle the technical aspects of it, and that's very tricky when you're doing a hybrid full board meeting. Particularly, it's much easier when we're all on Zoom or all on, there. So just with that background, I guess James is here from Alex Boris's office, and we're glad to have him. And maybe you can talk to us a little bit about Alex's bill and what you're trying to achieve, and give us some background or anything you want.
Thanks. I'll just take the mic. Anything I want. No, I very much appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. And I recognize basically everyone here. So this is a room full of veterans, so that's great. I'll keep it brief. I know you have a long meeting and a lot to discuss. Assemblymember Boris has introduced a bill. I'm going to send the links afterwards in the chat so that you have the link right to the bill text. It's very short compared to most other legislation, so you can read it easily. But essentially, this bill, if passed and enacted, would allow community boards to continue meeting virtually. And the reason it's so short, it's a very tailored piece of legislation. Because there was some, I don't want to say pushback, but there was a bit of a debate more like from folks upstate and folks in other parts of New York about how their public meetings function post-COVID, and they really prefer in person. So the bill is very, very, very tailored. It specifically says that the provision requiring in-person participation for certain public meetings will not apply to community boards in a city with a population of over 1 million, which only applies to community boards in New York City, of course. So it doesn't apply to other public meetings in New York City as of this time. It truly specifically only applies to community boards. And it strikes out, or it would strike out, the line in the law that also states that essentially the allowance of hybrid meetings is set to expire in 2024 as well in July, just like the all virtual meeting provision expired this past July. So this would strike that out and allow community boards to continue meeting virtually. So I think it's pretty clear where the assembly member stands on that, but if anybody has questions or anything of the sort, I'd be happy to answer. And I will send, like I mentioned, the bill number and a full link so you can read the bill or read the summary online.
So James, so this bill would basically say we could do everything virtually.
Yes,
We could do
essentially
everything virtually. Sorry.
Yes. Yep. Just basically like it was a few months ago, the bill would say community boards can do that.
So we could, if we want to have all Zoom meetings from now on, if the bill passed, we could do it for committees and the full board.
Yes.
Before we call on Barbara, I'm just curious, does it include anything about funding? Currently, our Zoom is funded by the Manhattan Borough President. So I would just like to know about that aspect.
That's a great question, and I'm going to write that down because currently it does not. And I will check in with our legislative team about that.
Thank you, because we have a very limited budget and we got a sweet deal because there were so many community boards in the same package. So I think that's an important thing to add. I see we have 3 hands up. Barbara Rudder.
Hi. I feel strongly about parts of it anyway, so I'm going to sort of go backwards. In terms of streaming, I 100% agree with you. I would like not to use the word Zoom because I'm hearing there are so many technologies now. I don't know why it would be just Zoom unless Will has a specific reason, but certainly in terms of having it online, of course, is great. Also going backwards, I am co-chair, as you know, of 3 committees, and I will say 2 of them we need to get speakers for and so on. So life has been easier with it. But the idea that more people come is a fallacy. And I think this meeting, which I think people care about, is an example where we do not have any more, I don't believe, than we used to have in the old days before COVID coming on site. So there is convenience getting where we used to struggle a lot more getting speakers. And you could get somebody in California that would be willing to come, and it makes it easier as co-chair. But not because we're opening up to the public. In terms of the full board, in terms of community board people, I find hybrid to really be awful for those of us that are coming face to face. It is, first of all, not only difficult, but I had a tough time hearing Russell because Russell couldn't use a microphone because I think, unless Will tells me otherwise, there was some sort of feedback and he couldn't do it. We were also told to be very careful about what we say. So I never have snarky remarks, but if I wanted to, I'm being facetious, I would have had to be very careful because it picks it up and somebody else can hear it and so on. And there was just a lack of connection. And last time there was only 3 people, I believe, that from our community board that were on Zoom. We have a different community board, a different relationship when we're face to face. In terms of the public, we had less people coming to the public. There was a very contentious issue, and none of the people that felt negative about the resolution even came. We had more people coming face to face, and we are having people come face to face now, but it's so much harder because they need to stand by a microphone so the people on Zoom can hear. So it's this mixed thing. I would like to say that we are face to face 100% for community board people, and for the public, my suggestion, which is what Rebecca Seawright does and Liz Kruger does, if they have a question, they could either email it before the meeting or they can put it in the chat and somebody can read it. And that may speed things up because if there's 25 people saying we don't want this building next door to me, there may be some sort of way that we can combine 3 or 4 questions the way Liz Kruger does, Rebecca Seawright, and I assume Alex will do also. So to sum it up, as far as full board meetings, I wish we would all come back, all meet with each other. I feel that people are so zoomed out. People are working at home. I've had people say, I don't Zoom for meetings anymore because I'm Zooming all day for work. It's not even good for you. I am worried about the number of hours I've spent in the last 4 years in front of the computer, and you know that there is some danger to it. So to sum up, I really, really urge people, we have people coming in wheelchairs and walkers and all of that, to come to our meetings, the community board people, the 50 of us, to come to the meetings face to face for the public. I would like to say face to face, but I'd be willing to say they can Zoom in. We don't have to worry about the audio of hearing if they just put, they could be live streaming or whatever it's called, where we don't have to worry about the special microphones or anything else like that. And in terms of committee meetings, to have it all on Zoom makes life easier as a co-chair. I know that's true, although I'm not getting any better attendance than I got before the meeting. And that's my summation. And yes, it should be one way or the other, Rebecca. We've discussed that before.
And I will just add to remind everyone, when we went through the blood center, I had this idea that we would allow for written testimony, like is done in other instances with a local and state government. And I think that's something we can all consider as well. That being said, since I would love James to stay here all night, but I know he doesn't have to. So if the people who have their hands up could give a thumbs up if you have a question for James, and then we'll get back to the list. I just don't want to keep him here if we don't have to. So I see Valerie put her thumbs up and Michelle. So we'll go to Valerie, then Michelle.
Do you want me to really quickly respond to the things that Barbara
I would like
mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Zoom is a catch-all. We also used to say we all used to say Skype. Now we say Zoom. It's just sort of like Kleenex. It's the brand name.
Fine.
It is by far the best brand of the device that we are using, the program that people can use to have a virtual meeting. But we have to have that virtual meeting to be able to stream it on YouTube. I would say, and I think this is probably what Alex and James would say, our opinion shouldn't be the opinion of all community boards.
No.
I would say that it's important to allow freedom if other community boards want to be more liberal with the use of Zoom. So whatever we decide, I don't think that we should get in the way of CB6 and CB7 and other community boards that want to use Zoom in a higher capacity than we may end up using it. You mentioned chat and putting information in via chat or email. The chat in a lot of community board meetings has turned into that where they allow chat to be used has been used to issue death threats and say really nasty things to speakers and really nasty things to board members or by board members to other board members. And that was why I think Alita and I came up with this at the very beginning of Zoom. And it was the best thing, I stand by it as the best decision we ever made, was to not allow the chat, because it is a side conversation that can derail the meeting. And you never want to have people making death threats and people, saying the things that they would say. And you can ask Trisha and other, and the BP's office what they have to deal with from other boards who have allowed their chats to be open. And, as a person who attends almost every one of the meetings over the last 4 years, plus, is going to a lot of these meetings pre-COVID, we do have more people. I don't have the statistics behind it. There are more people who are coming to these meetings. And the last thing of the notes that I wrote down is, Russell and needing to stand next to the mic. It's just going to be the new normal if you're going to stream. The streaming, unless you spend several $1,000s to get WNET, and what previously we did is we had the city council had an initiative called the Digital Inclusion Initiative. And the local council member who had a really awesome budget director thought that it'd be great to give community boards money for WNET to stream their full board meetings. He's now your district manager. And so that Digital Inclusion Initiative, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was phased out by the city council. So the new city council, the new speaker, do not offer that as an option. So we would really be on the hook for finding thousands of dollars for every meeting to have a professional crew come film, unless we could get a space for ourselves, which the city's not going to do, that is microphoned out and videoed out and everything like that.
Can I just answer the chat? It could be just to you the way it is now. And people say nasty things and when they say it in person. So, why can't it be that you and maybe the chair read the questions or quickly go through like we've done at so many forums. This is something that's used over and over again. The borough president, every other thing I go to uses the chat function, and it doesn't mean everybody can see the chat. I mean, people say nasty things, and I'm not sure if that's an answer. Are you saying that if we don't have to worry about hearing the people on Zoom and back and forth and people talking on Zoom, that we would still have the same feedback and same sensitivity? Because it's not been easy sitting there and hearing. I missed some of and my hearing is good, much of what Russell was saying last time. So
yeah, and like I said at the full board meeting, everybody needs to be patient, and we've got to learn how to do it. But if you're going to stream the meetings, people are going to have to act with decorum and not speak over people. We're going to have to get used to, standing in a certain place. We were able to have a pretty functional meeting at our land use meeting in July. Actually, it was a very functional meeting in our land use meeting in July. It was a pretty good meeting last month at full board, and it was a pretty good meeting at the Roosevelt Island Committee. I wouldn't say they were perfect by any means, but that's going to be the new normal.
That
if you're going to stream
Zoom, right? Roosevelt Island.
No, it was in person, and you can go and watch. It was at it was at a really bad acoustic old church on Roosevelt Island, but it was still actually pretty functional. People just had to stand up from their seat and walk to a certain area to where they could be heard by the people on Zoom.
So are you saying you would prefer hybrid then, is what I'm
not
hearing.
saying what I prefer.
I think this is a conversation we can continue when we get into the grunt of the meeting. I should have prefaced this whole meeting by saying thank you to Will for all he's done in these crazy times, and how lucky we are that James is here to hear our plea about funding. I do believe, Will, you're correct in that we don't have funding for that service anymore. And again, it was only for the full board, which is not everything that we do. And we all know we have lots of land use issues coming up. So we're going to go to Valerie and then Michelle, but Ed, I saw you put your thumbs up when your hand wasn't raised. So if you could redo that, if you have a question for James, that would be great.
Yeah. Rebecca, I think Ed just called me. I think he said he got bounced out, so he's on a time pressure. So I don't know if you have access to him. I'm perfectly willing to wait until he goes first.
So Ed, if you can give the thumbs up, we'll go to you first, just as long as your question is for James. And because of it's time sensitive, we'll let you.
Yeah, go ahead. Let him go first.
Yeah, Ed, you can unmute. You should have a button on your screen.
Well, it wasn't so much that. It was, my question was that, I got skipped over is what happened, and I got my hand down, so I didn't want to jump in front of Valerie, but, I just wanted to, I have to get my son at hockey practice, so I have to go over to LIC. It's just a couple of things. One, out of the gate, I just wanted to say, it's not so much as a question, but for Alex, I missed the very beginning about the application of the open meetings law. As many people know, I talk about it every time. I'm big on this First Amendment democracy thing. I got a real hang up about it. Frankly, I'm very concerned, just as general for the body politic, as to what Barbara was bringing up and what Will was bringing up as to decorum. And I'm not a Luddite. I don't mind the Zoom thing, and it is very convenient. And look, for committee meetings, it's great. You don't have to leave your house, and you can conduct meetings, and that's great. Convenience is the fastest way to lose your liberty. And frankly, I think there is something for getting off your tushy and going to the meeting. And if you can't get up and you can't go to the meeting, then maybe the community board isn't for you. And I do have problems because of my work in elections as an election attorney in democracy for, I won't say how many decades, but I have real trouble and concern that the organizations that's happening now, it is not like in 2000 with Bill Bradley and 2004 with Howard Dean, who I'm a veteran of. They could have only dreamt of the kind of activism that they began. They get no credit for. They were on top of it 20 years ago. But I think there is something for showing up in person, and people are awfully brave. One, with the mute button, which I find is used far too much and only angers people more. which leads to less decorum. And people are, they have a lot of bravery. A lot of people who don't have much bravery in person for reasons I won't go into are awful big, tough people on Zoom. And it's easy to be a tough person. But, come to a community board meeting in person with someone and you find that, that gets tamped down, and a little less volatility is a good thing in this democracy, especially in a place like New York, especially for community board 8. I like it. It's a little rough and tumble. I mean, goodness, if people could have been there 10 years ago when I joined the board, the back and forth, and that's a part of being a New Yorker. It's that give and take. And frankly, for members, what I like about the community board is this is where members, you're nodding your head. This is exactly where you hear what's going on. I mean, if you're so upset about an issue that you're willing to give up your dinner hour to come to the community board and talk about an issue, then as a member of the assembly, a member of the state senate, a member of Congress, whatever it is, as a former staffer, you pay attention to that. I mean, I know one of the early issues when I joined the board involved 62 East 62nd and York Avenue, an MSK. 300 people showed up at the Ramaz school. That catches your attention. You're nodding because you're right. It absolutely catches your attention. And, it's easy to get bombed from people in Brooklyn and Staten Island and the Bronx and Queens when you have these Zoom meetings, because they don't have to do anything. But if they really want to come and bomb your meeting, then they're going to have to get off their tushy, and they're going to have to get on the subway or drive their car or ride their bike or their scooter or whatever it is and show up in person. And that's, to me, that's a different thing. That's a different animal. So I don't know how it fits with the open meetings law, but I think for civility, I would not for, I'm not for the Zoom, and I'm not for reasons that Barbara said and others about the hybrid, because I do think there's difficulty with technology and it is not consistent for people hearing things. The other thing I would say is, as to the funding for this, I've been saying since I joined the board, and these notifications, it's the notice. It's the notice is really the hidden secret sauce here. And everybody's for the Zoom, but let's get to the point. The nub of the issue is the notification. And I see this with what's going on with congestion pricing, and we all know about the trick in August and when things are sleepy and all of a sudden more things happen in government when people are away. And that's old as the hills. But instead of posting on the street lamps and that kind of thing to the folks in the board's office, and running around and putting pieces of paper. I mean, talk about Luddite. You're putting pieces of paper on a street lamp. I have yet to see anybody actually read one. I'm sure they do. But, how about this? And I've been saying since Jackie Ludorf was chair, okay, going way back. Why don't we take a little slice of our budget, and why doesn't somebody like our town and some of these local papers give us free advertising? That way people in the board office like Will and everybody else don't have to go running around taping paper on street lamps. And we have, maybe that is something we should do, is have more electronic notification, wider notification, but you got to swap that out, you got to show up. So less Zoom for the meetings, more electronic notification. You notify a bigger audience, but the flip side to that is you're going to have to come to the meeting instead. And that was just all I wanted to say. I know I've gone long, but that's my feeling on the piece. And one last piece on that is in terms of speaking at the public meetings. And I know people go long. I know I'm probably most guilty of anybody. But the point is that one thing I learned down being an arbitrator in the small claims part is one of the reasons why that is the one part of the court system that people actually have the JD powers like off the charts, is what they tell you as an arbitrator is when they walk in the door, and Alita was an arbitrator, that's where I met her, or I saw her down there doing it too, is they tell you they get to go as long as they want. You don't say a word. They walk in the door. Hi, you're the plaintiff. Hi, you're the defendant. This is great. Plaintiff, you do your thing. Defendant, you do your thing. Now, it doesn't mean they get to go on and on and on. They do their thing once and that's that. But people want to know that they're at least being heard. And it goes a long way. it takes away, and you don't get as much aggravation, and you might actually get a little more cooperation. And that's my last comment on it. I know you'll go back to seeing more of the 59th Street Bridge. I'm here, I'll come back, but I'm going to be going over the 59th Street Bridge for the LIC in a couple of minutes. Valerie, thank you. Michelle, thank you. I am listening, but I'll disappear behind the bridge, but I'm here, and thanks for letting me kind of get back in my place in line, actually jumping you,
And-
Valerie.
You forgot to thank all of us.
If we have a
Oh,
vote,
well, thank you, Chuck. I sorry, I didn't mean to slight you.
if we have
Okay.
a vote and you're off camera, just if you can text me if you're listening and are there, so we can count you correctly and make
Okay.
sure you're included.
Sure,
And
no
I will
problem.
just add, before we turn it back to Valerie, that when we met in person during the public session, everyone was required to state their address before speaking. I think that's something maybe whoever the new chair is will re-implement. Maybe it's worth doing that on the committee level as well. And if it's something this committee wants to address at a later date, we can do that. But I think there's a solution to that part of it. So with that, let's go to Valerie and then Michelle. And then hopefully, and again, if anyone has a raised hand that wants to ask a question of James, please give a thumbs up so I can call on you sooner, and then we can let James go. Although, of course, he's welcome to stay.
Hi, James. I have more to say on this, but I just want to ask you the question first. And then Rebecca, I'm going to have to get off for a couple of minutes because I've got conflicting Zoom meetings tonight. But my question to you is, James, and I appreciate Alex wanting to do this as the most pointedly way he can in terms of, addressing the city. But my question is, it sounds like the text of the resolution or the legislation is to give community boards the latitude to do it hybrid or Zoom, hybrid or just in person. And I'm just wondering whether you can actually do that, because if one board does it one way and another board does it a different way, whether there's some objection from the public that depending upon where they live, they get to participate by Zoom, or otherwise they would have to come in person. And I just wonder whether that would be an impediment to that kind of legislation.
Cool. I'm gonna write that down as well. I think as of right now, at least, the folks at the let's call it the programming council of the assembly, they did not raise that as a flag in the bill. And yeah, the latitude that would be given is essentially to let boards have the meetings as they want, whether it would be fully virtual or hybrid or in person. All the text says is the in-person participation requirement for community boards in New York City would be doesn't apply essentially to them.
All right. Well,
But yeah, I'll check on that.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, I've got to sign off for a little while. I'll come back. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, James. Bye-bye, everybody.
And just quickly before we turn to Michelle, does it extend to the Manhattan Borough Board and the other district boards? Or is this just community board meetings?
Sorry.
Does the bill extend to for example, the Manhattan Borough Board, which the chair of our board participates on, or is it restricted to the 51 community boards?
Just community boards.
Okay, thanks. Now let's go to Michelle.
Thank you. So I want to give my questions to Alex. I have a few, but then I'd also like to comment and see, since I think it's my turn. No, there are no other questions, no other people with thumbs up. But anyway, so Alex, I'm still not totally understanding. Are you saying that the community boards have the right to be in person or not, all Zoom or not, hybrid or not? Is that what that bill says?
Yes, because currently there's an in-person requirement, and this is
Okay.
just lifting that.
Okay,
Right.
so we have all the options. Does the bill specify that it's full board? Does it talk about full board and committees separately, or does it talk about everything together at which those parameters apply?
So the bill doesn't differentiate between a full board, a committee, etc., which I believe means it would apply to anything the community board is doing.
Okay, so it's basically, he's giving the community board really latitude to handle it pretty much any way they would like. Okay, I wasn't clear about that. Now let me just give some of my comments. The one thing, I'll start backwards. The one thing I know that I object to really strongly, because we don't have the technology, we don't have the equipment, and that is the hybrid. When I couldn't come, there was a wellness reason. I couldn't get to one of the full board meetings and I participated on Zoom. It was one of the more frustrating experiences of my life. You could not hear. The two microphones that you had, one for Russell and one for members of the public, they are barely audible because the equipment is not that fine and that sophisticated. But aside from all that, you couldn't hear anything that was happening in the audience. So you couldn't hear if anybody called the question. You couldn't hear if somebody said, let's say in street life, okay, let's take A, B, D, and Q. You know, you couldn't hear any of that. It was so frustrating. So that I think that the hybrid is not the way to go unless we actually purchase this really, really sophisticated high-end sound system, which I don't think is practical financially and also for lugging it around, you know, and carrying it. So any hybrid meeting, I would really be in opposition to. I would like to see, but if it takes too much money or too difficult, I would like to see the meetings streamed, because I think it's really helpful for the public to be able to go to a meeting in either a live stream, not participatory, but observe in a live stream, or maybe see it at a later date because they had a conflict. Now, Will, I'm not understanding completely what you said about that, but I think you said that if we're not recording it, we cannot stream it. In other words, we can't do it through a different technology. Did I understand that correctly?
The mechanism that we use to stream it onto YouTube is through Zoom. And so the only technology that we have available to us are those meeting owls and is Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that. So if it continues to be possible, if we are, so that means actually the meeting has to be on Zoom in order for you to live stream it. So
yeah, it doesn't mean that everybody needs to be in the room. It means that, technically the meeting needs to have a Zoom room that exists. Doesn't mean that anybody needs to be invited into the room other than the meeting itself. But there's no mechanism to get it onto YouTube without a pass-through through Zoom. And so Zoom is not the necessary problems that you had there. It was the technology that we were using and the way I had set it up. And there was, a few other things that if you go back and I would say, because I felt similar about that meeting, if you listen to the other 2-3 meetings that we've done hybrid, the sound quality is much better throughout the duration of the meeting.
So if what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, and we wanted to go for full board and we wanted to go to in-person meeting only, you could conceivably at that in-person meeting create a Zoom link which could stream it to YouTube so that the public could watch it in real time or watch it and listen to it another time if they have a conflict. And to do that, you don't need to have them participating on Zoom remotely at the time. So if that's true, I would be for that. I would like for the full board, I'd like to see in-person meetings for everybody who wishes to attend, mandatory for the board, but streaming it, live stream it so that anybody else who wanted to see it for whatever reason could do that. Now, so I'm differentiating that from committee meetings. I think there's a lot to be said for committee meetings remaining on Zoom, not a hybrid. I'm just against hybrids. To me, it was a disaster, but I have no problem with that, especially for those of us who are on many, many, many committees. I'll just leave it at that. And I think that the participation at a committee meeting is a controllable thing. You very rarely have the numbers that you could get with a hot topic, you know, that something really dramatic, that people that may show up to have their voices heard at the full board. But even at a committee meeting, it's rare to get, you know, a couple of hundred people. I know a few times Knickerbocker Grays, we had a couple of hundred, we had to have breakout rooms, whatever. But that's really rare, but it does come up. But I think since it's rare, we can deal with it the way we dealt with it last time. So I think for convenience, and because there are so many meetings when you're talking about committee meetings and task forces, and because the number of participants is rarely more than 30, even if you had 10 members of the committee, you know, you may or may not have up to 20 participants, that I could see that staying on Zoom. I do want to say though, that if it's going to be on Zoom and you have no way of indicating as to whether or not you're finished speaking, that I would say that the co-chairs of the committee would have to basically say, are you done? Let's go to the next person. Because I think innocently, the mute often pops up and people are not finished. And then there's a frustration level and an anger level. You're there to express your opinion. So I would want to make sure that all opinions are expressed and that, you know, when your comments are finished, like in a normal conversation, people can sort of understand when you are done. But then a formal thing said, if you're done, we'll move on. So I would like to say that. And I think those are basically my comments. I think even on our committee meetings, we do need some etiquette rules for our Zoom meetings. And I would like to see things like no eating, no other conversations while you're on Zoom, making very careful that you're muted if you've got phone calls coming in or something like that, that we pay attention to how we look in the camera, which basically is showing your face up front to everybody else on the meeting. And then if streamed, will eventually go out, you know, to the world. So, but with that, I think the situation is a livable one, and nothing that Alex did is in opposition, or, I mean, it's all complimentary to these kinds of comments. He's basically given us the lead, and I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Next is Lori.
Hello, thank you very much, and thank you, James, for coming to present this legislation. I also want to thank Will, who I
Lori,
think
before you continue, you're really hard to hear right now.
I'm hard to hear?
Yeah. Do you have like a microphone plugged in somewhere else, like headphones that are just sitting on a table or something?
No, I don't.
Or anything sitting on top of your microphone?
No, let's sit here on top of my microphone.
Okay, just speak loudly and directly at your computer, I guess.
All right, can you hear me now?
It's better.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you to Will, who has just done an extraordinary job under incredibly difficult circumstances, making all of this happen. And I do think that those of you who are opposed to hybrid meetings need to consider a couple of things. The first thing is that this is obviously a new thing, and it will get better. And there's no reason for us to go back and stick our heads in the sand just because we're not happy when it doesn't come out perfect the first time. So that's number one. The second thing is, Rebecca, you said that you wanted to discuss 4 things. And But it all comes down to hybrid meetings, whether we want to have hybrid meetings. And I think that in order for us to be an inclusive and equitable board, that we have to have hybrid meetings. And because people who are parents and can't find a babysitter, and people who are elderly or disabled and can't get around, can't travel to the spaces that we book because our transportation system is not ADA accessible. Those people cannot attend if you're going to make a in-person only rule. And I think that that's really it's not very, well, it's certainly not inclusive, and it's not very well thought out, to be honest. The three board members, which included me and included Rebecca's son, whose name escapes me at the moment, the guy with the H. And the third person was Mrs. Brown. Two of the three of us have legitimate issues that I just mentioned. The lack of transportation, when someone is not feeling well enough to travel to a remote location. There are many things. But the bottom line is that you get more people when you do it hybrid. There were something like 30 people that I counted who came to the meeting, the hybrid meeting, via hybrid, the last time we had a meeting. And we, as Will said, we've had more people coming because they have access to it. If you make it an in-person only meeting, then you're eliminating the contributions of not only board members who have an issue, but the public and even the electeds. It's like you must, in my opinion, we must be accessible. And the only way to do that is to allow hybrid meetings. And I understand you're being uncomfortable with the fact that it's not pristine perfect the first time, but obviously the technology is there. And when you talk about expense, I mean, I know for a fact that our borough president is very supportive of having the meetings in a hybrid fashion. So if we want, perhaps we can appeal to him to give us some money to purchase a little bit better equipment. But there's no question that the better equipment is available. It's not a case of lugging things around. They don't weigh, a ridiculous, there's not a lot of poundage there. So the technology is there. And I don't think that we should be burying our heads in the sand and saying, well, if it's important enough for people to come to the meeting, then we'll take it seriously. If it's not, then we're not. That's just a very dangerous position to take. We need to be accessible. And one of the great things, even though the pandemic was horrible, and there's no question about that, but I believe that one of the very good things about it was the introduction of Zoom. And Zoom has made it possible for many more people than usual to participate in what we do. Thank you.
Gail.
Great. Next,
I
let's
think
go
Gail's
Gail.
next.
Thanks. I actually agree with everybody to date regarding the committees. And interestingly, I have found that with our committee, we are averaging around 30 participants as compared to when we've had in-person meetings and we've gotten maybe 8 to 10. So I do believe that it's a convenience. And if with that convenience, we can enable more people to attend, whether it's for health reasons or because they have babysitter or children challenges, then I think that that's absolutely great. I personally prefer to attend full board meetings in person because I do believe that there's more synergy that you get and you meet other board members, and all of that is really positive. But I think the reality is that not everyone is going to be able to participate in person. And Lori's point on accessibility is on target. I think we have to kind of think out of the box. And even though the technology right now might not be what we want it to be, I trust Will. I know he's very good at this. And if he says, if we keep working on it and we figure out a way to ensure that the technology works and people aren't frustrated as far as being able to hear each other and being respectful, I mean, I just think that it is part of the future. And if we can get more and more people to tune in and listen to what's going on with the community board, because it's happening hybridly, then I think that's a positive. And you certainly don't want to see good people drop off the board because for whatever reason, they're not able to get to in-person full board meetings. So for that reason, I'm leaning towards supporting the hybrid approach. Thanks.
Before we go back to Barbara and Michelle, we're going to call on Alita and then Abraham.
Right.
Thank you. I agree with people, which and I think there would probably be a consensus out there that committee meetings function really well on Zoom. There's a lot of participation from the public. It's easy for people. I know when there are events and there's both an in-person component and a virtual component, that if it's just in person, I don't always show up, but if it's virtual, I will log on because it's easy. And I imagine that's what the public thinks. They also are only entitled to speak in the public session. So there won't be the back and forth for Will that there in full board meetings. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, in full board meetings that there are in committee meetings. And it is a bunch of work because I also host Zoom meetings for work that I do, and technology goes awry and it could just be a mess, but it does give people accessibility. It gives people an opportunity to show up, especially if they're concerned with just one particular issue or one particular committee meeting. It allows more people to participate. And I think that that's critical. I think board members are a different story. Personal in-person meetings have, as I'm sure a lot of people have said, a lot of real benefits that is the reason that they're in person to begin with. And I think that that should be emphasized. On the other hand, when I've been away, I've been able to log on to full board meetings, and I've been really glad for that opportunity and would continue to do so. If we have hybrid meetings, I wouldn't expect the opportunity to maybe raise my hand and participate as much as if I was there. And so it should really only be used if there are exigent circumstances. But accessibility, the ability for people with young children or elderly parents or a spouse or somebody to be able to just show up virtually, I think can't be, is it underestimated or overestimated? I'm not thinking clearly right now, but one of those estimations. In other words, I support hybrid meetings for a full board, and committee meetings should stay on Zoom. And I really appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this because it's a big issue that affects all of us. So thank you to the chairs of the committee for doing this and to everyone for having an open mind. Thank you.
All right. Before we call on Abraham, I think, Chuck, if you agree, we're really talking about the full board and land use tonight. I don't think I haven't heard anyone object
Right.
publicly
I agree.
to
Yeah.
the committee meeting. So if that's something this group wants to address at a different time, I think we should make sure it's fairly posted.
Yeah, no, I think we can, if we do something, we could say we want to continue committee meetings on Zoom. Because I think that's the consensus, certainly, of everybody here. And it's probably the consensus of most of the board.
And Chuck, to just sort of piggyback on, I would say that this is why James and Alex's legislation is really important. Technically speaking, we have treated the committee meetings as like Russell and I and leadership made the decision that the committee meetings being on Zoom was a benefit still. But if we go by the actual text of the open meetings law and what we should be expected to be doing right now, we should be having this meeting in person, but what we've decided is that only the actions of the board, meaning those actions carried out at land use and at full board, are the, you know, be all end all enforceable. But, you know, there's some gray area to what we're doing by having our committee meetings on Zoom.
Spoken like
Although
a
we have till
spoken like a lawyer.
2025.
No, it's true. What Alex
Yep.
is, what Alex is, and Jane, you know, Jane presented it, and it was, I looked at the text of it, it was in the chat. What it basically does, it does two things. It basically says that the open meetings law requirement of in-person meetings is essentially put aside for community board meetings. And that includes the community board. That could even include committees, obviously. But then there's another part that extends the, you know, the use of Zoom meetings, which was going to be sunsetting at a certain point, and that's what that does. So that clears up any strictly legal impediments to doing what we would like to do, having the committee meetings on Zoom, and then we could do them all on Zoom if we wanted. But so I think we're on. I think the legislation, I agree with you, is important, Will, and hopefully it'll get, now that it's limited to the city, it will get through the legislature, but you never know.
And to give Alex some credit too,
hopefully-
the reason why he introduced this legislation is because my counterpart at CB6 and myself met him at a ribbon cutting for a park in sharing our district lines. And Jesus, if you remember Jesus Perez, who used to work for Gil Brewer, cornered him and gave him the idea of this legislation, and he went through and carried it out and actually put in the bill.
Good.
And hopefully it will include funding in the future.
Well,
we're gonna
James got the hint, or not the hint, but the actual discussion. So.
And we're going to go to Abraham, and then we'll return to previous speakers unless Judy has something to add, as she just joined.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Chuck. So I mean, I'm supportive of the legislation, but I think I just wanted to speak more on the, you know, the hybrid in-person versus remote. You know, I am supportive of the hybrid. You know, I think, you know, we are a community board. So the word that I am concerned about is community, the public and public engagement. You know, I've been a proponent of, you know, increasing our profile, doing more outreach to make sure that we do the things that we can to increase outreach to members of the public and increase their engagement. And I think that one of the positives that came out of COVID was Zoom. And I know that we have a lot of Zoom fatigue, but I think for individuals that have a hard time getting to in-person meetings, members of the public, I'm focusing on here because of either childcare, transportation, health issues, or there's just one topic that they want to listen in on. You know, they're not going to necessarily be inclined to come to a meeting in person, you know, if there's just one issue that they want to speak to. So I think that, again, just because the technology still needs work, that we should kind of throw it all out because it's not at a place that we want it to be. That's the nature of technology. There will be growing pains. We can get there with you know, trial and error, increased funding. You know, so the technology is there. We can get to a place where we can accommodate both hybrid. Hybrid participation and in person. I think for board members, I think the expectation should be to be in person for a variety of reasons. I think one in particular, it creates and fosters the camaraderie, the collaboration, and interactions that we should as board members have, that I think because of COVID, you know, we lost and we're just starting to get back as we're coming in person, which I think is very important. So we should have that be the default. With obviously exceptions if there are board members that can't come for, you know, reasons such as health or other extenuating circumstances. But I don't think that we should do away with Zoom for members of the public because we can get it done. And again, to go along with, you know, the further outreach to the public, which I know we'll hear more about in the coming future, that we should keep the hybrid as an option, as the option. Thank you.
I guess we should go back to Barbara. We'll go across top again.
have a
Oh,
couple of
Judy
things.
has her hand up.
No,
Oh,
Judy wanted, let Judy speak. She
Sure.
she wasn't here before, I guess. Go ahead, Judy.
I'm sorry, I had another meeting that I had to attend in the building, so I missed most of this. When you're talking about going back to meetings, Abraham had just mentioned in person, is that committee meetings as well as full
No.
board land use?
No,
Or are
Judy.
we still having committee meetings by Zoom?
No,
Because
committee meetings on Zoom. That was the consensus. We're only talking about full board meetings.
Oh, because I agree with that. I have to say, I think you get far more attendance for committee meetings on Zoom than we were getting in person.
Yeah. No, I think
Full
that's.
board meeting, I have no problem coming in person.
Okay. Thanks, Judy. I
And
guess-
Judy, we're talking about it in different ways, right? If we continue hybrid meetings in some sense, we're looking at, do board members have to be there in person versus do people who participate in the public session have to be there in person, to the issue of just being able to live stream it if we want to bring it all back to being in person. And the fourth was about elected officials. So with that, I think we'll go to Michelle.
Well, I think is.
No, it was Barbara and I accidentally. put her
Barbara,
hand
do you
down,
still
but
want
she
to
didn't.
talk, Barbara?
Of course.
You're right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What do you think?
I could.
I first of all just want to say that when I was
Grave
critical
area.
about the meetings, I mean, Will has been so amazing. I don't even know how to say it. And Russell has been so good with it. And if I'm talking about glitches, it's not about them. And I think we all can say beyond thank yous, but we can't even express to them for what they've done over the years and even these last few times. I'm going to start with one little thing. This I know is picayune, and Will, we've talked about it. I hope we don't, if we have any resolution at all, I hope we don't use the word Zoom, just like I would not want to use the word Kleenex, because Puff's tissues are better than Kleenex. And I don't know if we would have to have a meeting to change the word if some other technology comes along. So why can't we just say live stream or something more generic?
We promise any resolution.
Okay, that would be fine.
We won't use the
I
word
think
Zoom.
people have said a couple of things. I can't believe the people that I totally agree with. It was very heartwarming to me. One of the things Alita said, I think, and I may have misinterpreting what she says, but I agree with my misinterpretation, is that if you can't make it, and we do say you have to be online, if we do have it live stream, you can still listen in and possibly call up a friend and say, I'm going to email you with the questions, just like we do where the public could come to somebody from the community board and ask a question for the community board. So there could be some way of interacting if we don't want to go back and forth, which I found very disturbing. And in terms of the comment that we'll have to have good behavior, I made a snarky remark that I'm snarky. I really didn't mean it. I often turn to the person next to me and say, why did you vote yes or no? Or what do you think? Because I learned from the interaction that I don't learn when I'm sitting in my room together. And Michelle got me upset when she said, everybody looks at your face, because I forget to put on makeup and things like that. So I have to remember, Michelle, that people are looking at me. The other thing is, I remember in beginning days talking to Trisha about the rules, and the rules are very specific. It isn't just like, well, I have a child at home, I can't, or I don't feel like going out. We do have transportation. It was very like an emergency happened, something really emergency. So if we do have full board meetings or land use meetings, I hope that they're spelled out. And I know at one point, and again, I don't mean to criticize, we went on and on like you can't vote unless you have your camera on. And then people didn't have their camera on, or they did, but they were in a tunnel and you couldn't see in a tunnel. We have to have rules that people follow along with it. I hope that full board meetings, that community board people are there, are marked there. If they want to listen in, they can, but that the voting is for people that are there, and it will be a much better run community board, in my opinion.
We definitely discourage tunnel vision, definitely. Okay. Why don't we?
And I should go and comb my hair and put makeup on.
No, I don't think that's the issue. I think people
I know, I'm just kidding.
referring to people eating and doing,
Yeah, that's, and do everything else. We don't concentrate in a way. I
Right.
remember hearing a doctor talk about when she's on Zoom. She said where she used to be face-to-face concentrate, she says now she's looking at the test results and she's doing, and you just don't, it's just not the same thing. You don't get the same thing out of it.
Michelle? Michelle, go ahead. And then we'll go.
Yeah,
back.
thank you. Look, I think that there is a balance. I also get the sense that if you're gonna, hang your hat, that if everybody can come in person, then we can't have it in person. It's lack of inclusion and all that. And when you start to go down that route, not everybody can do everything all the time. But when you start to go down that route, it sort of seems that this committee is going to go the way of hybrid. Now, the other alternative is it could be all Zoom, which is a possibility. Nobody's ever complained about clarity. Nobody's complained about attendance. It's not something I would prefer, but that hybrid meeting, if you haven't experienced it, it was horrendous. And it's not enough to say that, to me, that the technology will improve somewhere down the line. Because if that happens, and if that's the case, you can always change. You can always say, okay, the technology is great. We got funding for a fabulous sound system, and we can do this, and everybody hears everybody, and it's really great. So, I'm concerned that we don't sort of kick ourselves in the shin here. But the other thing is this, another compromise that we could make. I know somebody said that, the public session would have to be in person. Well, actually, Valerie is here and actually made this point, and it made some sense. If you're looking for hybrid, and there's no back and forth, because that's the problem with hybrid, because you don't hear and you can't respond to the room, that the public session, which would give access to everybody, could be on Zoom, because they're coming up to a mic. Will has a timer. They speak, they are heard. There's no back and forth commentary, and that allows for the public to come. So Valerie had suggested that. I think it's a good idea. If you don't want to go all person or all this or all that. But I think you really have to be careful and limit this hybrid. It is not a good way. It was horrible. And I wish you could all sort of try it. When you end up, I sort of felt like an idiot, because every minute I said, well, I don't understand. What are we voting on? Oh, well, somebody called the question. Oh, well, that person was in the third row. We on Zoom didn't hear him call the question. We didn't hear anything, nothing. And so you're always saying, well, what number are you on? Well, what committee is on? And you can only tell if you can identify the people coming to the podium. It was very disturbing, takes up a lot of time and effort, and it's an imposition for the people who have shown up. You take a 2.5-hour meeting and you turn it into a 4-hour meeting. As for the electeds and their representatives, I don't have a real opinion about that, but I can say that because our policy is to not have them take questions, that the same thing would apply as would for the public. If the communication is only going one way, then they could be on Zoom. The problem with the hybrid is the interaction. And so that's what I would like to put out there for all of you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Before we call on the next person, I just want to, I was about to call on you, Will. I think the technology aspect is one part, but there's also the location. I think a lot of the issues we had with the hybrid meetings was not actually because of the technology we either purchased or were given by the borough president, but just a result of the space in which we were located. So I think Will should comment on that, and then we'll turn to Valerie, Alita, and Abraham.
Yeah, thank you. and I remarked on this earlier, that the first meeting we did that was hybrid, which was in that smaller space at Hunter College where everybody was sitting a little closer. It was a little bit cozier of an environment, and the acoustics were much better. That if you were participating in that hybrid meeting, you were actually able to pretty much hear everything that was happening. I did the like, you know, Monday morning quarterback or whatever the phrase is, after the meeting that Michelle, that you're describing being the virtual participant on. And I went through and I made a list of, you know, 20 different things that we could improve. And, you know, I implemented as many of those as I could. And so I guess I want to ask for like a thumbs up for everybody who's gone and watched the YouTube from either that meeting or especially the meeting following that. So the meeting in September, because the YouTube is exactly what everybody in Zoom was hearing at that meeting. So I know Lori participated in both of those via virtually. She can speak to it if there was a market improvement. But I've watched both of them now. And I would encourage everybody, if they haven't, and that, you know, take a little bit of time. You don't have to watch the whole meeting, but, you know, jump around. And, you know, if you all recall, there were problems with hearing Julie Menon. Those are my fault. I didn't update one of the meeting cameras, and so we were only using one camera actually, which is why it wasn't picking her up at the September meeting. But if you notice, we moved her over, we moved everybody else over, and honestly, after that, I think everybody could hear and be heard pretty well. So if you haven't had a chance, please take, before you go and vote on anything at the full board meeting, take a few minutes of your time, if you care passionately about this, to go and watch the YouTube clips and, you know, turn the sound on. You can see the captioning is catching most of what people are saying. It does struggle. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I do want to express that Michelle, your experience was valid. It was really bad for the parts of the meeting that were bad. There was a lot of the meeting that wasn't great. And then the other thing that Lori can probably speak to as well, or anybody who participated virtually, maybe Barry, at the full board meeting, is that we started typing into the chat so everybody could see what we were voting on. So moving on to transportation committee vote for item 1, you know, we were putting that in the chat so that it was easier for people to follow along. It was something that you had said previously. I believe, Michelle, that you thought, Michelle, explain what you're saying in the chat there.
Yeah, thanks, Will. No, what I wanted to know, so I understand what you're saying about inviting us to listen to the Zoom. How could you tell by listening to the Zoom as it goes out on YouTube what the Zoom participants were hearing in the room? You see, that's the thing.
No, good question. I actually have an answer for you.
Okay.
The YouTube is exactly what you would be hearing if you were watching it. So the YouTube is taking the stream, taking the dialogue and everything that's happening in the meeting, and it's just taking it and porting it over 1-to-1. It's not changing anything. It's not amplifying or decreasing anything. It is just 1-to-1. Whatever you're hearing in the Zoom room is what you will hear on the YouTube clip. So if you go to the YouTube and you listen to it, that's exactly what everybody was hearing. But also, you probably noticed during the meeting, I would sporadically just put in a headphone, and that was me just listening to make sure that they could hear what was being said in an audible way.
Oh, so you could hear them in their Zoom as they were hearing it.
Yes.
But how would you solve the problem that there were no, by nature of the numbers that show up, if you have a full board in person, so you have 50 people plus the public, and you have no microphones, you know, that'll service anything past the second row. How do you hear, if you're on Zoom, how are you hearing what's happening in the back of the rooms?
Yeah.
And the rooms have to be a certain size just to accommodate the crowd.
So I guess the answer is well, actually, how about this? The first statement is, even pre-COVID, we didn't always use the same meeting rooms for what we were doing. Right. If I knew that this was the blood center, this was, you know, a big topic, I would make sure we had a 300-person room. And, there are capacity limits in all those rooms too, just like there are capacity limits in Zoom. But I knew pretty well what size of room. We had 3 sort of like general sizes of rooms that are available to us: 25 people rooms, 75 people rooms, and 300 person rooms. The thing that I learned from that meeting is that unless there's going to be a really big hot button issue, that we're not going to attract, as long as we're allowing the public to participate virtually, we're never going to attract 125 people, 150 people. We're going to get the 50 board members, or 47 or 46 or whatever it is, whoever shows up, and then we're going to get half of the number of the people that we used to get. So where we used to get 60 members of the public, we had 30 members of the public on Zoom and 30 members of the public at the meeting. So we no longer need to aim for, and this is the mistake that I realized I made about the July full board meeting that I corrected towards at the September full board meeting. The auditorium style room at Hunter was just not conducive to the meeting, because if anybody remembers from being in person, it wasn't a full room. It wasn't even close to a full room. We were barely filling up, the area, but it was spread out. And so it did mean that people who were far away. The other thing I would point out is that if you go back and you watch the September meeting, yes, Barbara did sit pretty close, but none of us would ever have described Barbara Rudder, pre-COVID or now, as a very loud person. I recognize I'm a loud person. I talk very loudly. That Russell isn't, exactly as loud as I am. That's something that people learn and can, adjust to in time. But Barbara Rudder is not a loud person, and you could hear her crystal clear. The closed captioning that was picking up could read and hear her crystal clear. And even Judy, who was sitting in the back, which Judy, sit in the first 3 rows, please. It was sitting in the back and had a mask on. It could still pick up what she was saying pretty well. It wasn't great, but obviously Judy should sit in the first 3 rows as instructed, and all the board members should follow my orders, but not really. If you do control the first 5 rows sort of, parameter, you're never going to have somebody speaking at a full board meeting from the back of the room. You shouldn't, because we've always had the rule of the board members sit in the first 3 rows. So what I would say there is it should, and it did, capture what was being said by board members, saying second or saying, I have issues with this or that. It captured that pretty well if you go back and you watch the video. It wasn't perfect, and there are ways that we can fix it. And I hope if you watch and you experienced that July meeting and you watch that, you'll see an improvement that as a little bit more process of acting it out over and over, you're going to get better. You're going to shoot better at your free throws, right? So that's what
I would add that we were able to purchase those owl cameras. Those are the little white things that you saw at the front of the room, because we had excess money in our budget, and the budget committee decided to be proactive about what we would do on Zoom. I think whatever this committee decides and whatever is voted on the full board, we can continue to use whatever resources we have to either purchase more microphones, or if some new great technology comes out that would make it easier, we can do that.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
We also purchased some projectors. We also purchased some laptops that would all be designed for doing this when we didn't know, when we were back in the middle of COVID, and even actually go back and watch the video of our meeting out at Hunter College. I would say that even went pretty well, as far as just picking up what was being said and how it was.
School?
Yeah, at Hunter College High School. Sorry.
That was outside.
Outdoors.
Yeah. And even outdoors, even with 5 feet distance between everybody and masking everybody, it was still pretty good at picking up what people were saying. So there are ways that we can do it. It'll capture the meeting as it takes place. I do feel pretty comfortable with that. Whatever you decide on board member participation, I do think that there are ways that we can make sure that the public can still participate virtually.
Since I called on Valerie, but Will wanted to hear Lori's perspective. Valerie, if you're okay with Lori just going quickly, and then we'll turn right back to you. Yeah, so let's go to Lori and then we'll go straight to Valerie.
Hi. Okay, I mean, I actually agree with everything that Will said. I mean, it was fine, you know, at both of those meetings, there was really no problem in hearing the audio. What I understand is the problem is the people who were actually at the meeting, that they were having a problem with it. But, you know, but from my perspective, you know, being on Zoom, it was fine. But I wanted to say one other thing, and then I'll shut up, which is I would really oppose the different standards between board members and the public, and only because what you will do is you will discourage anyone who is, you know, someone who's a member of the public who is happy to join the meetings on Zoom is going to be discouraged from actually running for the board, and that means parents, you know, which a lot of people, you know, we want to get, you know, parents on the board, and those who are elderly and those who are disabled. So those three groups who would have access to the meetings remotely would not have access to the board if they ran for the board. So I think that's a problem. I don't think that we should distinguish between the two, because you're going to set up an equity problem. Okay, that's it.
Valerie's next. Let's go to Valerie, and let's try to sum up and get to something here. We've been talking about this, but I think we have a consensus here, and we ought to try to move this forward.
Yeah,
Lori, go ahead.
I think that's right. I just want to say, Will, you're too apologetic. You've been doing a really great job in very few meetings and moving this really forward. And now you can add a new component to your resume. When you took on this job, I didn't think you would become a video and sound expert, but it's certainly been a huge component of the job. And I just want to say, I am in favor of the hybrid meeting. I mean, I hearken back and I agree with what Lori's saying. I think we should encourage board members to come in person, only because of the camaraderie and collegiality, thank you, collegiality that it can foster. We spend so much time on all these meetings that we don't get to see each other and collaborate and get a real feeling. So I think it's important from that perspective. But to your point, Lori, I agree with you. We want as many different kinds of people on our board as we can possibly have. And I think one of the great things about Zoom live streaming is that, especially for the disabled group, or not even of people who have a hard time hearing, to be able to have the closed captioning aspect has been an enormous bolster. I know I hear a lot of people from my neighborhood association who have really welcomed the live streaming and the ability to put the closed caption on, because we don't have somebody in the room who does sign language. And at least when we're live streaming and have Zoom, we have that ability, and we're able to reach a group of people that we couldn't with just in-person meetings. So I think that's really, really important. And also, I just want to harken back to Barbara Chalky, who, you know, would never have one of her meetings where somebody in a wheelchair could not show up. And that's why I think it's super important that we allow the public to participate through, I'm using live streaming, Barbara, not using any brand name, but I think that's super important, and we need to continue that as much as possible. And I only think that, you know, the real question here is funding and making sure that and actually I think we can hone in on the locations that work best for our meetings. And I think if we focus on what the agendas are going to be, I mean, Will especially has his ear to the ground and would know whether we needed a larger meeting room or anything like that. Because even before COVID, you would be in a meeting room, and if we were all up front talking to the front of the room, there would always be people in the back who would yell out, "Hey, I can't hear what you're saying." So I think this has really helped. And so I'll cut my remarks to saying I really think that a hybrid is a good idea. And I just want to say, for the electeds, sorry, last point, on the electeds and their representatives, I would also encourage them to come to our meetings because I think it creates an opportunity for the community to interact with them even before and after they give their reports, that they can step to the back of the room and talk about an issue that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get in contact with them about. And I think that creates a really nice connection between the community and the electeds and their representatives. So I'm done with that. Thank you very much.
And I just want to add 2 points. I think Valerie was spot on the electeds, in my personal opinion, because remember, it also applies to us. I'm sure there have been countless meetings where everyone in this room had a dying question for a representative or an actual official, and being able to kind of grab them, quietly before they leave is important. And I would just add, as we get closer to hopefully coming to a resolution, just to remind everyone that when we voted to have hybrid meetings, board members were only allowed to participate via Zoom if they had a legitimate excuse that was approved by the chair. You guys can think about that. You can also think about, okay, do we want to set a maximum number of, Zoom approved meetings before maybe they have to have a conversation with the chair and or like the executive committee, whatever you want. That's something you can think of. So I just wanted to put that out there, because we didn't just fully allow hybrid.
The only other one more comment is, one of the things that we've lost via the Zoom meetings is that when we move to executive session, meaning the public can't participate, if we were all in the same room, there was the ability of somebody from the public to give a note to a member of the board to voice a question or concern. We've kind of lost that in the Zoom. I don't know, maybe Will can speak to that a little bit more, but I think we have to find a way to be able to do that via the hybrid meeting a little bit better, whether that's, from chat to Will and then Will giving it to somebody else to say, but I think that's an important part. And I will say that I agree with what Alita and Will instituting the no chat rule, because I know I participated recently in a Department of Transportation hearing, and there was so much going on in the chat that it was so distracting. It was civil, but it was so distracting that it took away from listening to the real meeting. So I'm done now. Sorry, bye.
All right, Alita, let's see if someone want to make a resolution at some point.
I'll be fast. I wanted to just address the elected officials, agree that they should come. It also shows a relationship between the community board and the elected officials, even if we don't always agree, that we're working together and that spirit goes into the public meetings. Two, in terms of the public, I think they should be able to come to the community board meetings if they want to and participate in the public session, that they shouldn't be restricted, if that was what someone was suggesting, to Zoom. Three, Will does do a great job. It is hard to host these things. Four, there are other people from the office that come to the board meetings. Maybe questions from the community could go to one of those other office staff, and they could direct it at appropriate times, if that's possible, or give it maybe to the chairs of committees. But I guess I'm not allowed to propose a resolution since I spoke to everyone, so I'll stop there. But I do think that people should be able to choose, but that there should be a different standard for community board members, because there is something intangible that comes from being at the meetings together. And when their people are on Zoom, they become one or two issue people. And the meetings that they speak up at, the committees that they're involved in, that's what they're known for. And people are just fuller people. They're much broader than just showing up at transportation or parks or budget. And having people at the meeting and being able to chat makes them those richer people and not just one issue people. So there's something to be said for that. Even if they say nothing else at the meeting, just having an opportunity to discuss the weather or the traffic, it just opens up possibilities, and that's what we're there for. So I fully support hybrid meetings, but there are a lot of things that we've talked about, so I don't know how a resolution would be phrased, but to deal with all of those issues. And I also think, because I think that it was appalling for Elliot Spitzer to be on Zoom when we were at a meeting, even though he wasn't there to fully present, he was there as an applicant. So I think that applicants who want to speak in the public session should come to the community board meetings, because it shows a commitment to the community that is very different than when you're just there virtually. Thank you.
And if I may, before you go on, Chuck, to just echo to Alita and Valerie's points, about as far as like passing the note sort of thing. Is not universal, but a lot of people who engage in community board meetings probably do have somebody in the board's phone number. I noticed, Valerie, you came and you showed me your phone. I think that there's a thing there, but we could obviously also, if we needed to, the idea of saying like, here's our email address. If you wanted to give a message to a board member, say attention Valerie Mason, and shoot an email to the info@cb8m.com account, and multiple staff members can monitor it during the full board meeting and forward it over to somebody's email address during the meeting, if that's something that people feel passionately about. I don't know.
I do. I think it's
And you can also-
important. It doesn't come up that often, but I think it is something that was lost when we were only on Zoom, and people sometimes do have comments. I wouldn't hope, and I'd hope not, and I wouldn't expect there to be a flood of those kinds of comments, but it's nice if there were possible avenues, and if it does become overwhelming, to just readjust it. Thank you.
Thanks.
I would also say we all now get paper agendas again and pens. So I know I've passed a few notes to Will in my time. So I think that's an easy way to do it as well. So let's go to Barbara.
I'll be very quick. First of all, a comment, and I think that Lori actually said something. With all the great work you're doing to make sure the Zoomers are hearing, the people in the audience, we didn't have it as easy in the audience that you couldn't use a microphone and so on. So for somebody that did show up, it was less easy for us. I also want to say, somebody said that it's up to the community board to decide what reasons you have for not showing up. I thought it was a borough president. What I understood, there were very definite borough president reasons. So it can't just be, well, I'm a mother and I never, or a father and I never want to show up. It can be there's an emergency. My support service didn't show up, or somebody got very sick, something very specific that you have to give in, just like supposedly if you want an excuse. And maybe that's something that at another time we could spell out. Or we could find out if it is from the borough president, but it should not. The feeling that we want parents to be able to join. Well, parents are doing homework with their kids and they're serving the kids dinner and they're not really participating in a community board meeting, that it's too distracting. So with that, I can't make it, but I would say the hybrid can be for the public. I think that if we can have somebody like at info, the info, or let me ask Will, can't we have a chat where nobody sees it but you, or you and selected people?
That's what we have now. Yeah.
Yeah. So why can't it be that the stream of questions come in and maybe one person is assigned, the chair or whatever, to sort of glean through the questions and ask it? It would also save a huge amount of time, because possibly we would be able to combine 5, 6, 7 questions together that are often so repetitive in the public.
Yeah.
And possibly we can do that, and that because we all talk about saving time at a community board meeting.
Two technical reasons there. One, because staff sees those and no one else sees them. So it would really be putting a lot on staff to say this is important and should be said, and this is not important, shouldn't be said. But the other thing about aggregating different people's points to one question. And yes, that's important in some types of meetings, but our job, as I always tell people, is for allowing the community to feel heard, giving them their 2 minutes to speak. And by aggregating people's comments, and yes, we sometimes have to do that when the meeting gets very long and we say, everybody raise your hand if you're in support of this, raise your hand now if you're in opposition to it. We do that. But for the most part, our role in government is to provide the public forum for the community to give us their opinions. And then, yes, for you guys to formulate an opinion based on what you've heard and your expertise, and share those things with our sister agencies. But I know
that we've had forums, Will, where you have agreed that we can have people just write on a piece of paper and hand it in, and so we have had community board meetings. that I was part of, you know.
I would say that the difference there is informational versus
Okay, I'm not gonna
versus
argue
like
with you there.
hearings and that sort of thing.
And the other thing is, I remember the very first meeting, we had to wait until we got a quorum. I'm worried there's going to be a little this or that, and we won't get a quorum, and that's difficult. You know, we need to encourage people to come unless there's an overriding, and I would say that the board members that are different than the public should be able to come, and this is what they should be concentrating on. I had a doctor where I had a Zoom meeting with the doctor, and he misdiagnosed me because the dog was barking in the background and somebody was calling him in the other room. You know, there's certain things you're supposed to be concentrating on.
All right, can we go to Judy Snyder?
Yeah, very quickly, because I assume Abraham's going to make a resolution. I just want to say two things. When we're at a meeting, I liked when Will brought the microphone over and Julie Menon and the other people came and spoke there. Either if people want to talk, they should line up to speak, no matter what the issue is. This is after the public session. Or is it possible, Will, to have a handheld mic that can be passed around to the audience? Because sitting in the audience, the last meeting I was in the first row on the side, and I couldn't hear some of what the people who were in the auditorium with me way on the other side were saying. So I think that's just has nothing to do with our meeting. I just think that that would be a good thing to do if we could do that. So everyone in the room, as well as whoever is on the Zoom, can hear what's going on.
That's why you have people, listen, Judy, you've been to plenty of meetings, and so have I, where they have questions and things like that. And when you have someone running a microphone around the thing, that wastes a lot of time. People should speak in a microphone, but they should line up like they do now.
Well, then they should line up. We
Not
should put the
practical.
microphone like where the chairs are, have another microphone, and have the people line up who want to speak on the topic so that everybody can hear.
Right, that's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I would make that a permanent suggestion. That's it for me.
Abraham?
Okay, sorry, I was just trying to look at something. I was just looking at the prior temporary resolution that we had for hybrid, but I think as a whole, I would say that we would adopt a resolution that Community Board 8 would take the hybrid approach for meetings with, I would say, with the strong preference or encouragement that community board members attend in person where possible.
Full board meetings you're talking about now, right?
Full board, of course, yes, this is for full
And
board
land
meetings.
use, and land use.
And land use, yes.
Yeah,
And with regards to the actual, procedures for participation virtually, I think that we can develop those as we go based on experience. I don't know that we need to define those at present, but that those will be kind of further developed as we kind of evolve into that hybrid adoption.
You want to say that we're going to do the committee meetings on Zoom?
Yes, I'm happy with that as well. Yes.
Okay, add that.
And I would, if you take it as a friendly amendment, include, that the public will be able to participate via Zoom, regardless of board suggestions, board member suggestions or policies, and that they will further be entitled to participate in the public session via Zoom. I would like that to just be.
I'm in favor of any public participation. So yes, I welcome and I accept that amendment.
Is there a second?
Alita?
Judy, second that. Okay. And the comments?
Alita, then Valerie.
Comments? Okay, Alita.
I would add that we would encourage elected officials to come in person. That's all.
Yeah,
Sure. I think that makes sense.
very much so.
Frankly, it's going to be in their interest. You know that. They're always trying to,
And they're always campaigning, so yes. but it's nice.
Exactly.
I would
Doesn't
say
hurt to, it doesn't hurt
elected
to have it in there.
officials-
Thank you.
I would say elected officials and representatives, because
Right.
they
And
do
or
not always.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, the you're right. Make them come. I just
Yes.
have to,
And for land use meetings, I don't know if this was covered at all, but the applicants must be there in person. I would ask for a friendly amendment, because I think it makes, they're better members of the community if they show up and we get to see things. I just think that the interaction between people is vital, and having applicants at the meetings with their presentations when we're all there should be required, but thank you.
boards, yeah.
I thought
Michelle's
Michelle
saying
was making
presentation.
some
Well, yeah,
gestures.
that means they would have to bring some kind of presentation.
But they always have, that's always how we've done it, so it shouldn't be a hardship for them. They all know.
Is that,
Yeah,
is
they always had
And-
some, Zach. So,
that okay with you?
I-
Adrian?
yes, I am in favor of the
You
applicants.
need a seconder, that's okay with you then? Okay.
And I
Thank you.
don't believe we should reference Alex's bill in this resolution, but I think we should stipulate it with, this is the community board's decision until whatever month in 2025. It's not up to us anymore. We
Right,
should add something like that. Valerie?
Oh, wait, Valerie.
did you wanna,
No, I was just, mine was just gonna be exactly what Aaliyah said, the electeds and their representatives. And then I think it would have to be, maybe, I don't know if this is subject to whatever the Manhattan Borough president says. I mean, if he overrides any of this, that would have to be included.
I don't know that, I don't know that it would.
No, I think it's the state.
Well, I mean, if he mandates that, okay, whatever. I mean, I'm fine, as long as it's the electeds and the representatives and the applicants. I mean, somebody might have an emergency, just like the chair has the ability to give an excuse. I think that the chair or whoever's chairing the meeting would have the, discretion to allow somebody to participate by live stream as opposed to coming in as well.
Yeah.
That would be my other suggestion. That's it, if Abraham accepts that.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you're right in emphasizing the chair's discretion.
Are we ready?
And for applicants, are you, and this is, I guess, more an Alita question, are you saying, I assume you're talking about like at our land use committee meeting,
Yes.
the applicants wanted to come in person, and I would think that they would continue to want to, but you're not saying like if they wanted to speak to their application in the public session.
No, I think that,
Oh,
I mean,
presentation.
that's
You're
what I
talking about
was
presentation.
earlier, but I think it's for land use, specifically when we have the big presentation by
Yeah,
applicant.
yeah, you're talking about
Oh.
presentations. We don't usually have presentations at the full board. Land use, we do, and they usually come in.
Right. Could I also say something about what Rebecca said with respect to Alex's bill, which is, I don't know if it's too early to present a different, that has nothing to do with the resolution currently on the floor, but I think we should take a stand on Alex's resolution because it's really important, and there might not be comments from the upstate or the other out-of-city people, that it's just a good opportunity to voice our support for it.
Okay.
Did
we
I-
can-
Since
I
it wasn't on
misunderstand you,
the
Rebecca?
agenda, I would love, maybe we either take it at another meeting, because I've already texted James about the funding part. And I think we can either do it at a later meeting, or if it's up to Russell, if he wants to bring it up under new business. I think, we should all have time to review the bill, really, because I couldn't support a bill, even
That's
though I
true,
agreed with it,
plus-
if it didn't have funding.
You want
And I
funding.
don't know how it works when they're not in session right now. They're not in session until
Right,
January, right?
right,
So I guess we have some time,
We
but
do
then
have
to
time.
be able to look at it before they go back in session. Thank you for pointing that out, Rebecca.
And we can send it, if you want, to the full board, since not everybody is here tonight. I think, yeah, I see Michelle nodding. That's usually what she wants. So let's
We
do
can
that.
We can
That's
attach
perfect.
it to the minutes of
Yeah, we
tonight's
should
meeting.
attach it to the minutes, I agree. Are we ready to vote on this now, everybody?
Not seeing any other hands up,
Okay,
so
so why don't you want to take attendance? or-
Barbara, I think, is calling to questions.
Barbara.
You
I
don't
thought, I thought my hand was up before. I don't understand the resolution. Are you saying that it will be hybrid, but we're encouraging people to come?
have-
And there was another thing that was encouraging. I mean, what does encouraging mean?
Well, so I guess a better way of putting it is it's going to stick to what the actual open meetings law says, is that your board members are supposed to be in person, unless they have an extraordinary circumstance, such as disability, which the open meetings law does stipulate that if you have a permanent disability, you should be treated as if you are in present and do count to quorum. So that is something that the open meetings law allows. Illness, caregiving responsibilities, inclement weather, and other significant or unexpected factors. That's
Okay,
what we had previously put into the last
yes, but
resolution.
it was
Could keep that
questioned.
same language about that we used before. That
Well, except that caretaker is something I'd like to talk about. I questioned it. It isn't that I'm a parent, but that it's extraordinary caretaking. Like something happened that the person, my caretaker didn't show up, my nanny didn't show up, or my husband wasn't able to, or wife wasn't able to come home. Not just that I am a caretaker in the sense I have a child. I did question the borough president's office about it, and that is not what they meant. So
Yeah,
I
Abraham
would like
did
it that
agree
we
to
extend that.
And Abraham did agree that, we would include a line about up to the chair's discretion. I think that's very important in this case. And obviously the
Well, but
resolution will
I
include
think
all
that
the
we
other
have to
laws.
give the chair some guideline about what that means.
Well, so
So
right now there's
are we aware of, like, is this happening a lot, Barbara, that you're seeing this? Someone
Yes,
going around,
I am.
going around the care?
People that said I wanted Zoom because I have to help my child with homework every night.
No, but
I-
board members have been.
Board member,
Had over 40 board members at the last two
right,
meetings. And there were only, as Will said, there were only 3 people who were
Right.
on Zoom, board members.
I know, but I
You didn't get a
still
lot
think
of
we
board
have to
members.
spell it out.
And there are a lot of board members
if
who,
you
I'm
wanna
not sure you
add-
can spell out those things, so,
I
it's-
would like to,
Will?
if you don't mind, I would like to amend it to say extraordinary caretaking
No, I
challenge.
think you're getting into the weeds on that. I think it has to be,
Okay.
it should be left,
So-
you have to talk to the chair, get the chairs.
So the way the wording reads now is experiencing extraordinary circumstances such as. So I think what you're trying to say is you want the caretaking to be under the to be clarified to be extraordinary, not
Yes.
just ordinary.
At that meeting, somebody said that means if I'm a parent, I can stay home and be a caretaker. And the answer was I guess so.
Well,
And when I
I wanna hear
questioned
from
it
Will.
after, what?
I want to hear
And
from
so-
Will, but I'd also say if you want to add an amendment saying if you are remote 6 meetings in a row, you have
I think
to.
that would be a good,
so what I was going to say is if you go back and you look at the minutes from the July full board meeting, and it'll also be true in the September full board meeting, we've always had present, absent excused, absent unexcused, and now we have to have sections that say virtual, it's virtual, not, I don't know if it says virtual excused, but whatever, it says virtual, and then it lists everybody whose names are participating virtually. And we've clarified whether you are excused to participate virtually or you're unexcused to participate virtually. And I think this is probably important to clarify. I think we should treat, if you're participating virtually unexcused, it is the same as an unexcused absence.
well, the difference is that you may still vote. This happened at the meeting. What I heard is that there was an unexcused absence, but the person's vote was taken. So that's different. If I just don't show up and I'm unexcused, I'm not voting. But you could be not have a good reason for being virtual and still vote, and your vote is taken. So what difference does it make if you're excused or not?
What I would say is maybe this is a conversation for the bylaws to committee to consider and
Now, let's
amending
not get into
the.
that. Now, first of all,
or-
as a practical matter, if you have something that says you're participating virtual and someone's participating virtual in every meeting or a lot of meetings, those things go to the borough president's office. That's going to be one of the considerations that I'm sure they'll look at. And if I were the board chair, and I'm sure the board chair, someone, will look at this and say, hey, unless you have a real reason, you shouldn't be just coming in virtually every meeting. And I think a lot of that'll take care of itself. I'll be surprised. I mean, if you have, I think, there are people who have issues, continuing issues, and they'll participate virtually, and that should be their if we're gonna support virtual participation, then we should.
Well,
allow
that
that.
could be 2 years later, but
And-
Chuck, I do care about votes. Votes are very important.
You have to
Sometimes
let
2
people
or
vote
3
if they're
votes that make or break
participating.
something.
Barbara, if they're participating virtually or not, if they're allowed to participate, their votes count. We're not gonna say their votes don't count.
So that there's no such
and I
thing as
think Chuck said
unexcused
the
virtual.
most-
In
Chuck said the most
in your
important
way,
thing.
there
We
isn't.
had-
The question is, I think it'll be noted. I don't want to we're getting way more in the weeds here. I think that it already says they're supposed to get something from the chair to do that. And then
Chuck, you said it. Sorry,
What?
please finish.
no, I'm saying, so I think that's gonna be one of the issues. And I think it should be noted whether if they're not given an excuse, that'll be taken into consideration. But I don't think you can throw their vote out. You're letting them
And
participate.
I think Chuck said it perfectly. We had over 40 people there. I know I had a legitimate excuse and could have participated remotely at the last meeting and decided not to. I'm sure all of you could have had a legitimate excuse and decided to show up. So we just need to keep continuing, encouraging people to show up in person and trust that they will choose to do so unless it's a real.
And I've had a lot of younger members come up and say, gee, I'm glad we're back together because I've been on the board for 2 years and I had never met any of you. I never met you and never had a chance to talk to you. And that's obviously an important aspect of being on the board, being able to get to know your fellow board members and talk to them personally. I mean, I'm the longest serving board member, and now that Barry's not on the board, the oldest board member, I think, unless someone else comes that I can think of, but I can't right now. But I make it.
Gary is frantically saying no.
No, there's somebody older than me who's on the board.
I think Judy.
Judy said.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, Judy. Okay, I yield the floor to Judy. No, but I think that I try to and I try to make every meeting that I can, and I think so I think if you're going to be doing it virtually, you should get some approval from and participate, and from the chair, and that's fine. And but I think if you do it anyway, they can't stop you, and that's and then you'll just it'll have to just be noted. That's all, and that's something that will be taken into account or not by the borough president when you're looking at it. Because I mean, board chair and the board chair talks to the borough president's office, and if someone's abusing that privilege, I think that takes care of itself. But I don't know if we can get down to specifying with fine detail what we think is acceptable behavior or not. That's the only thing I'll say.
Yeah, I don't agree with Barbara. I agree with you, Chuck. I think we're going to have a new chair. We're going to have faith in our new chair that individual is going to know the right thing to tell the board member. And I think we have to deal with that and we should move on. And it's time to take a vote. I can't make the motion, but I think we've discussed this at length and it's time to vote on the motion.
Lori wants to would you like to? Go ahead, Lori.
I'd like to call the question.
Okay, is there a second on that? Any objections? Okay, Rebecca, why don't you call the roll, make sure we have.
All right. So, and apologies if it's a little bit out of order. It won't be alphabetical. We have Rebecca Dangor, we have Chuck Warren, we have Lori Borres, Abraham Salcido, Alita Camp, Barbara Rudder, Ed Hartzog, Gail Barron, Judy Schneider, Lori Borres, Michelle Birnbaum, Valerie Mason. I almost just called Barry, but I didn't. So, if I didn't call your name, please raise your hand. Okay, so if you'd like to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause, please raise your hand.
Okay. That
Seeing
looks-
none, it's unanimous.
Yes, good. Good discussion, everyone. And
And we would welcome a motion to adjourn unless anyone has new or old business, which I don't think we do.
Judy, motion to adjourn, yes, okay.
I see Gail and Judy. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
Gail, were you trying to raise your hand?
No, she was just saying motion to adjourn.
She was. So let's just call on,
Does Gail want to say anything? Yes, okay, go ahead.
Just quickly, what I think that would be a good idea is to start to think in terms of looking at our bylaws at large. You know, it's been a long time since they were written, and I recognize that we're looking at specific bylaws based on need and an issue that comes up at this point in time. But I think that we haven't really revised them, looked at them, and that at least to start to give some consideration to perhaps recommending to the new chair and the board at large, whether or not they're willing to just kind of create a committee to look at the bylaws, see what areas might have to be updated, what might be just fine. Because I think that that could serve us well, but that's.
Gail, the only thing I would have to say to that is I think we have a committee to look at that. And that's
Well, no, but I'm saying not putting all the burden just on this committee. There may be other people on the board to join. No, it would be the lead would be the rules committee, of course, but
I would
that's
say
just.
continue to advocate with whoever the next chair is or whoever is a candidate, that we need to be able to get meetings on the calendar. That is our biggest issue. So that is what I would suggest. The more people, you know, Chuck, Taina, and myself will definitely be advocating for that. But the more of you who do that, that's why it took so long for us to have this meeting.
But well, we've already
Michelle?
made changes, by the way, in the bylaws. We changed our election procedure. We had amendments dealing with the public member. We had amendments dealing with the way you make amendments to the bylaws and stuff like that. And there are other things that we can, you know, think about, and we're open to suggestions from people who have issues, specific issues. I mean, the borough president they put out sort of their standard bylaws and stuff, and I know that, and Rebecca has done great work in looking at the bylaws of so many other community boards. I think she's got just, I don't know if you have all of them, but you have most of them. And
Definitely
so,
Manhattan. I would say I stopped at Manhattan.
right, all the Manhattan boards, and that's been extremely helpful. So we're trying to, but we're open to any kind of suggestions that are, or issues that people want to raise. But we're in the process of adjourning. So Michelle, how about the last word?
No, I was, I was just going to say that I think the bylaws review should remain in the bylaws committees. I would like to see a lot of the things that are happening remain in their original committees. We have too many committees and task force. We have a lot of duplication. There aren't enough nights of the week. And if we go back to in-person meetings, you know, well, not for committees so much, but it would be hard to find places. So I would just like to see everything stay in the committee. I'm very happy to have a review. I would welcome that, but I just want to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So with that, I'm very happy to adjourn, if that's, everybody agrees.
And you can all join our committee if you're not on it.
I'm on that committee.
That I know.
Michelle's been an active participant, yes. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate everybody's efforts, and we'll see everyone. We have a transportation committee coming up
Wednesday.
Right, so we'll see a number of you at that meeting, I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Good
Take care.
night. Thank you.
Thank you, Will, as always.
Pleasure, Chuck. My pleasure, everyone. Glad it was a